Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us on this chilly fall evening. I hope everyone's had a chance to enjoy the changing leaves on the trees. Welcome to the Portland Parks Foundation's Fall Friends and Allies Summit. I would first like to acknowledge that we live and do our parks work on the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes whose ancestors have lived fulsome lives here for over 11,000 years. Their descendants and many other diverse Native peoples continue to live and work here. We're grateful for their ongoing and vibrant presence. And as guests on these stolen lands, we respect the work of Indigenous leaders and families and pledge to recognize and their knowledge, creativity, and resilience in our work. Among the many things that the Portland Parks Foundation does are 2 Friends and Ally Summits per year. Spring to inspire and celebrate the good work of our 200 plus friends groups, and fall to learn how to do that work better. I want to thank our sponsor, Columbia Bank, and all our donors who make our work on these programs possible. Check out our website for details on other programs. 2 that are coming up tomorrow night, building community engagement with an equity lens, and the following night, Thursday night, investing in your volunteers. But better yet, become a member of the Portland Parks Foundation and help us do even more programs. Thanks to our staff and our interpreters, Sarika and Taiwo. If you would like to be able to better see their efforts, please pin them. You can do that by just the little 3 dots in the frame that they're in, and you can pin them, and that way you'll be able to see them as we continue this discussion. Your questions, we're going to keep the chat off during the presentations, but we'll turn it back on when Commissioner Ryan is done, and then we'll entertain your questions. So tonight we are bringing you a discussion on one of the greatest challenges our city faces, really nearly every city is facing, the growing number of our neighbors who are unhoused. We're honored to have Commissioner Dan Ryan to talk about the policies and the politics. But first we'd like to set the stage with some baseline facts with a short presentation by Johnny Lewis, who's the program coordinator for the city's Streets to Stability team. I saw a version of Johnny's presentation a few weeks ago, and I found it extremely valuable for understanding the breadth of the challenges and how the city is handling these challenges strategically and tactically. But I also want to offer a little bit of context. In a recent statistics from HUD, Portland is 24th in the country for rates of homelessness per 100,000 people. Our rate is 240. The highest is Santa Cruz and Watsonville with 825. San Francisco's at 397. Seattle's at 365. This doesn't in any way make our problems any less severe. It just is helpful, I think, to understand the context that many cities are facing. Johnny's been doing this work for a while now. He got his start with the city as a PSU Hatfield Fellow, and for the past 4 years, he's been supporting the city's homelessness and urban camping impact reduction program. He's helped develop new shelters such as the Kenton Women's Shelter, and he developed the multi-bureau work group that created a pretty innovative and important new category within the city's zoning code called outdoor shelters. This new zone creates a pathway for more organizations and even individuals to pitch in and help on this problem, with everything from underused parking lots to simply hosting an RV in your driveway. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Johnny Lewis. Thanks so much for being with us, Johnny.
Thank you, Randy. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to showcase my PowerPoint presentation here shortly.
You ready for me to pull it up?
Yes, please.
All right.
Thank you, Brian. Hi, everyone. My name is Johnny Lewis. Again, I use he, him pronouns. I am a program coordinator with the city's Homelessness and Urban Camping Impact Reduction Program. I've also been supporting Commissioner Ryan's office and the Streets to Stability team as well. Thank you so much for having me here. I have about 15 minutes that I wanted to use to present on our program, just primarily as it relates to the one point of contact campsite reporting system and how that process works and what to expect, especially as it relates to our response to these issues during this time of COVID-19. I would like to offer a trigger warning, however, as issues of campsite cleanup and campsite removal are incredibly contentious ones within our community. There are individuals who would like to see our program clean and remove camps much more quickly, while others quite passionately prefer we remain hands-off altogether. I think it is abundantly clear that homelessness is one of the most pressing issues facing our community, and there is broad agreement that we should work towards safe, stable housing for everyone. City and county leaders are pursuing a wide range of solutions, from providing rent relief to expanding shelter capacity to reducing the impacts of homelessness, and that's where our program comes in. While our community works on long-term solutions to homelessness, we do exactly what our name implies: minimize impacts. Next slide, please, Brian. Much of our program's focus and direction can be found in our strategic plan. There we outline our mission, vision, and primary goals. While there are many facets to our program, including providing increased access to hygiene or identifying safe spaces for people to sleep, and some of this I will touch on briefly later in this presentation, we are also the group behind the one point of contact campsite reporting system. Next slide, please. This slide depicts a very simplified flow chart showcasing the campsite cleanup and or removal process. Through the campsite reporting system we have in place, we receive reports from the community and dispatch crews to work with people in encampments to conduct on-site assessments and to help individuals maintain low-impact sites. There are two ways to submit a report. You can go to pdxreporter.org and select the campsite report icon, or you can call 311. Our team of 3 receive anywhere from 800 to 1,200 reports a week, although we have seen that number go up and fluctuate over the last few months especially. Submitting a report will automatically create a work assignment to dispatch a crew with lived experience to visit that location, engage with individuals on site, pick up camper identified garbage, and send a site assessment back to our team. The crew that responds is from Central City Concern's Clean Start program. This is a homeless to work program, and again, these are our first responders to most reports. They'll pick up camper identified garbage and other debris, but they will not touch anything identified as personal property. I really want folks in the community to know that we never stopped responding to reports through the pandemic. We are removing, on average, 650,000 pounds of garbage from the community every month. However, I do want to highlight that our response time to reports received went from 24 to 48 hours pre-pandemic to upwards of a week, depending on the site location. And this is due to a multitude of factors, but our crews continue to respond and we are actively working to get caught up currently. One item that will assist greatly in allowing us to respond more quickly: we have 11 clean start trucks in the field, where we had 8 just a few short months ago, but we have received funding to expand to a total of 14 trucks. Again, we now have an 11th truck out in the field as of this week, with the other 3 coming online in the coming months. Again, filing a report using 311 or by going to pdxreporter.org and checking the campsite report icon automatically creates a work assignment for a crew to respond to start the process. Our program recommends filing a new campsite report at least once a week to ensure that the city has an open and active work assignment in the system for a crew to respond, to remove trash and debris, and also to provide us with an accurate and current assessment as to the conditions on site. It is important to know that this is not a system that is more responsive based on the number of reports received. Our response for posting and removal of sites is based on risks posed, not volume of complaints generated. Next slide, please, Brian. If a site is determined to have met our removal thresholds, then we are required to post that campsite with a posting notice. The posting notice provides folks living within that space at least 72 hours to pack up their belongings to leave before we might return to collect whatever was left behind. This timeline has shifted in response to various agreements through the years, but it is currently 72 hours to 10 days with the passage of HB 3124, meaning individuals have at least 72 hours to pack up their belongings and vacate before our crews can come back to collect whatever is left behind. Since March of 2020, COVID has created considerable constraints regarding our process of camp removals, but our crews have been instrumental in providing resources and information to individuals in encampments, in addition to continuing to provide garbage and bio-removal service. Many locations we have responded to may have met our posting thresholds, but with COVID considerations in mind, we have not had the same tools in our tool belt as we had previously. For context, prior to March 2020, prior to the pandemic, we were doing 40 to 60 full site removals a week. From March 2020 until July 2020, there were no removals, and this was in compliance with guidance that was issued to every local jurisdiction by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which said, in summary, do not disperse encampments. Our program worked with the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management and county health officials to update this policy and our approach to removals, while also pivoting our vendors to continue to visit encampments to conduct campsite cleanups and remove as much camper identified garbage as they could in spaces throughout the city. From July 2020 until now, we have been doing approximately 3 to 10 removals a week, depending on the week. In many locations, it is taking our crews much longer today to work through areas that have been posted for removal than it did prior to the pandemic. For example, there was a large posted removal that occurred at Delta Park recently. This removal took all 9 of our rapid response crews 2 weeks to perform. This is not to mention the outreach and engagement that happened prior to the removal on the part of our navigation team. As a program, we remain committed to addressing the camps that pose the greatest risk to public health and safety, and this is where we prioritize our resources. Anytime a camp is posted for removal, a notification goes out to all Joint Office of Homeless Services contracted service providers to inform them of the posting notice that went up and where. Our program has learned that we are far more effective when we assist individuals experiencing homelessness with accessing services. And for those reasons, we work very closely with service providers regarding issues of encampments throughout the city. One group in particular that I just mentioned that you can learn more about on our website is called the Navigation Team. This group is instrumental in engaging with folks at high impact encampments to work with them to identify and remove barriers that might be in place towards getting them housed, like replacing a birth certificate or ID, anything necessary to access services, shelter, housing, or permanent supportive housing. Property removed through our posted removal process is stored in our storage facility for up to 30 days for individuals to reclaim. And our storage facility is located in inner Southeast Portland near the Orange Max line. Next slide, please. Here's a list of the objective criteria our crews focus on when assessing campsites. Evidence of conspicuous drug use. Typically, we're looking for the presence of uncapped sharps, the amount of uncontained trash and debris. This is the amount of trash removed or the amount of uncontained debris in any given area, proximity to a school, a park, or private residence. The environmental impact, is there a hazmat cleanup required? Does it restrict ADA access? Is the site posted no trespassing? How big is the camp? During the pandemic, our primary focus has been on larger encampments of 8 or more structures. Verified reports of violence or crime being reported. This piece of criteria is important for me to pause on. Our group is not part of law enforcement, and I'm not a law enforcement officer. Whenever community members allege crime at an encampment, we work with our partners in law enforcement. The only group suited to address criminal activity is the police. It is essential that community members report criminal acts other than camping to the police, in addition to submitting a campsite report if a camp is present. Our group will verify reports with law enforcement, and it's important that the community reports criminal issues directly to law enforcement as well. Finally, blocking public access. This could be a blocked stairwell leading to a park, or restricting maintenance activities, such as blocking a manhole cover or some type of other city infrastructure. All of these criteria work together to provide our team with an objective assessment as to the conditions on site. Any combination of these criteria could lead to a posting notice. We rely on objective assessments following reports to make determinations on next steps. And this could be following up with outreach and service providers and perhaps posting the location with a posting notice should circumstances warrant. It should be noted that simply reporting a site to the city does not guarantee immediate removal. There is a process that we have designed at the city intended to protect everyone involved, both housed and unhoused. Next slide, please, Brian. Here are 3 key performance measures I've included over 3 fiscal years to provide you with a sense of some of the trends we are looking at. Our program continues to grow, and in fact, we are in the process of adding 2 new additional staff members to make our team of 3 a team of 5. I've also mentioned how we are going to be adding to our fleet of Clean Start trucks, which is our first responder to reports received. What began as 8 trucks is now 11 trucks, and we will soon have a total of 14 in the coming months, which will most definitely reduce our response time to reports received and increase the number of assessments done in any given year, in addition to the amount of garbage we are able to remove from areas throughout the community. Additionally, we will be working to get better information out to the community, which leads me back to our strategic plan. Next slide, please. As part of our strategic plan, our first strategic goal talks about increased communication surrounding our program. We are seeking to create a public-facing data dashboard that is intended to better communicate with the community. While COVID has delayed efforts in getting this up and running as quickly as we might like, it will go a long way to communicate as to whether or not any given reported location was visited, whether trash was removed, and also perhaps whether or not the location has been posted for removal. For now, until the dashboard is developed, community members can view our weekly campsite reports on our website to view some weekly statistics and see where our crews have been focusing their cleanup efforts. Next slide, please. Our second strategic goal calls for increased access to hygiene. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, already insufficient public toilet options have been significantly reduced for the local unhoused population. Lack of appropriate hygiene options contributes to the spread of disease. Appropriate sanitation is critical for reducing the transmission of COVID-19 and other diseases such as hepatitis A and Shigella. Since March of 2020, we have been able to procure, place, and service approximately 135 hygiene units throughout town. We have porta potties with interior hand washing stations or just standalone exterior hand washing stations. There are an additional 54 units that are managed in part by our Portland Bureau of Emergency Management, and these facilities are located in parks to provide hygiene access during this time of COVID. These units can all be viewed on a map on our website for those that are interested. It's also important for me to highlight that if you do notice a unit in need of service, please call 311 and identify the location, and we can dispatch our vendor to get out there to assist with that. Next slide, please. We have also been working to expand access to low barrier employment opportunities. My colleague has been leading new programming involving peer-led community outreach and micro trash disposal. We will continue to work to expand and augment these programs and to sort of provide one example where we are seeing a benefit by using this type of programming. Illegal dumping is a huge issue right now throughout Portland. And one peer-led community outreach group recently removed 3,000 pounds of garbage from one area of town alone in one day. Again, we will continue to build out this type of programming as the city recognizes the invaluable skills that unhoused community members acquire because of their lived experiences and seeks to compensate them for their assistance in solving community problems. Next slide, please, Brian.
Did that work? Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Our third strategic goal discusses identifying and creating lawful places for people to sleep. And I think you'll be hearing from Commissioner Ryan shortly more about this topic. But with the passage of the Sheltered Housing Continuum Code package, we now have a new code category within our zoning code called outdoor shelters, which will go a long way in creating more options to create safe spaces for individuals experiencing homelessness to be. And our program is proud to have taken part in that work. Along those lines, last year in March of 2020, when news of the pandemic was beginning to hit home, our group at the direction of the mayor's office quickly pivoted to create 3 outdoor emergency shelters the community has dubbed C3PO, or creating conscious communities with people outside. And these spaces host approximately 110 villagers at any given time. Next slide, please.
Problem. We'll get it. Ah.
Well, that's okay. Thank you, Brian. Our program is not designed to solve homelessness. It's important to know that our program prioritizes health and safety above all else through harm reduction for both housed and unhoused Portlanders. We take our responsibility to treat people experiencing homelessness with dignity and respect very seriously. We're proud of all the people we've helped transition into shelter space or access mental health and addiction treatment. We walk a fine line between balancing the needs of a vulnerable population and managing our public spaces in such a way that is acceptable to everyone. Last slide, please, Brian. And thank you all for listening. This is my contact information here. I now believe Commissioner Ryan will be presenting shortly, but I'd be happy to answer any questions following his presentation. And thank you.
Johnny, thank you so much for this sort of ground level view of how things are operating. I think it's really valuable. Johnny will be around for questions after Commissioner Ryan's presentation, and we'll even stay a little later past 6:30 so we can make sure to get as many questions as we can. So without further ado, Dan Ryan is a man of many lives. Professionally, his arc spans from the arts, theater, specifically to fundraising. He led Portland State's first capital campaign, for instance, and of course, he led the Portland School Foundation, otherwise known as All Hands Raised, where he built that organization into a beacon of equity over 11 years. He's now a rookie, one of our rookies on the Portland City Council, and his first foray into politics, or at least the electoral kind. But as a gay man living with HIV, Dan also, as they say, got a new lease on life. Not everyone in his generation did. And that second life, Dan has generously given to public service, education, and activism, all with an incredible compassion and generosity of spirit, a combination that is needed from all of us to help and someday solve this humanitarian crisis of houselessness. So with that, I would like to bring you.
Thank you so much, Randy, Greg. That was a very generous and kind introduction. And hello, good evening to the Portland Parks Foundation Board and friends. It's great to be invited and included. And thanks to Columbia Bank for sponsoring such good work. And Johnny, that's the first time I've heard that presentation, and it was really helpful for me to listen to. And it was a treat to follow you. So thank you, Johnny. I just wanted to also acknowledge that the Commissioner Rubio, who oversees the Portland Parks, is really a great collaborator. And so we go way back in terms of collaborating in the nonprofit space. It's kind of a skill set you must learn there. And I will like to add that I think we're bringing that to the City Council at a much needed time. So I wanted to give and acknowledge Commissioner Rubio. And it's great to see you, Director Long, who does such a great job running the Parks Bureau. Okay, with that, let's go to the next slide.
All right, let me pull it up.
Oh, the slides aren't up.
I was letting them look at your face, but now.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Now
I mean, well, I feel bad for them. So, what I hope happens during this presentation is that you'll leave with a much better understanding of the challenge that we're facing as a community. I think it's easy to have create a lot of myths about what our region is doing. There's so much frustration right now around houselessness. And I'm talking to myself right now, and hopefully this will include you. I just think it's so important to take a moment to remember that these are human beings living on our streets. And it's definitely the highest numbers we've ever seen as a city. And that is why I'm excited to spend some time with you talking about the building of the Safe Rest Villages and really provide you with some comprehensive knowledge about the restorative supports that we know that they will provide. And I also hope, like in the Q&A, we'll really start to listen to one another and think about how your organizations can support this work. This is a shared responsibility, one could say a shared sacrifice, and more importantly, a shared opportunity for Portland to really pivot as we come together to tackle definitely the biggest challenge of my lifetime here in the city of Portland. Let's go to the next slide. So the problem, first of all, these photos were taken as just in the past week, and these are photos that you all have in your brain as you drive around the city. We all know the problem. We all witness the camping and the impacts that it's having. And likely most of us here today have not experienced houselessness ourselves. Although if anyone has, I encourage you to share your stories in the Q&A. I think it's important that we all tell our stories, as personal as they are, to help eliminate the stigma. The more we eliminate stigmas, the better we can heal and move forward. It is really a time to change the narrative around housing and houselessness in our community. And I do believe that really does start with honesty. There are misunderstandings about the differences, for example, between camping and outdoor shelters. This misinformation and misunderstandings out there about the program. As you heard from Johnny earlier, the impact reduction team works to clean up after the camps and help support camps accessing services, with a very key component of this work, the navigation team partners. And so with that, just remember that camping is illegal, but we are not criminalizing houselessness. There are more houseless people on the street with severe mental health challenges right now than we probably ever experienced, but we cannot and should not criminalize houselessness. What we can do is be way more aggressive, if you will, about providing services. And that's what I'm here to do with tonight's conversation, is to focus on that. As we go to the next slide, I just wanted to start with just taking a moment myself to remind myself about what motivated me to get involved. This started about 10 years ago when my third brother, I'm the youngest of 8, he was diagnosed with bipolar pretty late in life. It wasn't when he was a child like you would do today. And growing up, he was always either my favorite brother, and I do mean favorite, or just like a nightmare. And it was kind of a quick switch that would occur. So when he started medicating with recreation drugs, it was, even as a little kid, I wasn't surprised. And so the long story short, it progressed over time. There was a time where he was married with 2 kids at home and had a stable job, and he was seeing a therapist and was treated, if you will. And so he went off his treatment. And like many people with mental health, when they go off treatment, many times they seek other ways to soothe. And so he started doing drugs and medicating himself. And that led eventually to coming back home to Portland. And eventually he found his space on the streets. And even though all of us in my family made attempts, and really valid attempts, to house him, he needed services that we couldn't have. And he needed 24/7 services as well. And so eventually he just didn't want to burden us. So he would go back out in the streets. And it was a pretty difficult thing to experience. I remember once I was going to a meeting at 7:30 in the morning, and he had a sign at a off ramp, and I had to pretend I didn't see my brother as I was going to then chair a meeting at 7:30 downtown. So it was a rough road. So when 9 years ago, around this time of year, we found out that he passed away in a restroom with a bottle of vodka, 54 cents, I always remember that part, and a bus transfer. It was sad but not surprising. And I just always said to myself at that time, when I can heal myself, I really want to make sure that I become part of helping build a better system in the city of Portland for people that are houseless. So this is a humanitarian crisis. I'm not the only one that has a personal story. There are many people that do, and I do think it's important for us to talk about those. I also think it's important to overlay that with the COVID fatigue that's also real. It's like we have COVID fatigue, compassion fatigue, and all of these are a part of the macro mental health, if you will, of our city right now. And the challenges related to living with unsheltered in Portland is also very real. The impacts of houselessness, particularly on our environment, which is important to everyone, but especially this audience, to our park neighbors, our park users, and park staff, is immense. Nadine, I remember in my first month when I started, Director Long, you were in the meeting with several other bureau directors, and I just got the assignment to oversee the joint office. I should have said that earlier, but you probably maybe knew that. And that's because this is an effort with the county, who has the people services, they provide the services, and the city, the infrastructure. And one of my main focuses of my first year in office, I've been here 13 months, is to really strengthen that partnership. It really needed it. And I will say today, I'm very proud of that strength. So thank you for muting. I will say that we just need to keep responding with these in that meeting. What I recall is I asked, are other bureaus experiencing the impacts of houselessness? And boy, did that meeting change in terms of engagement and people wanting to tell this new commissioner what they really needed to hear. So everyone at that meeting talked about the impacts of houselessness on their staff, on their bureau. And that's when I was really clear that we were too siloed in our approach, even within the city, and I'll get to that later. But my main thing here is that we just really need to keep responding with radical compassion and focus on harm reduction. People experiencing houselessness need shelters, not just to be moved along. They need somewhere where they can really move to and receive services. Parks and other public spaces do face impacts of our unhoused neighbors. I'm sure many of you have stories about that. And again, listening to Johnny talk about the impact direction team and its increased capacity since July, and Portland Parks now has new levy funded frontline workers soon. And I just want to thank everyone for your patience as we move through this, and how we also keep coming together to figure out what our roles are so that we can make a dent and keep making progress. Let's go to the next slide.
Working on it.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. And now I want to shift the focus on how we look at unhoused Portlanders who are camping in public spaces. As Johnny mentioned, we in the council took up the shelter to housing continuum work. It created a new community service for outdoor shelters. We needed to look at that we landed on policy that said there's no camping in parks. It does not allow managed shelters under certain conditions during emergencies. It does not allow camping in parks, but it does allow managed shelters under certain conditions during emergencies. Camping remains illegal everywhere on public lands. That's Title 14 for those looking into the details. But being houselessness is not illegal. It's important to take this in. We're part of the Ninth Circuit Court. And the Ninth Circuit Court, it's called the Boise decision. It affects every city on the West Coast. We must provide services that before we can remove somebody. And so when I have friends come back from cities in the Midwest and they ask me questions why we don't sweep in the same way they do there, I explain this court decision. And so hence the need to do something different. One thing I noticed when I first came into office. The need to do something different. One thing I noticed when I first came into office. Is everyone else hearing that? Is everyone else hearing that?
Yes.
Okay, I think someone unmuted. It's really amazing when someone unmutes what happens. Anyway, I'm back and we're focused with all of you that are listening. And I was talking about the Ninth Circuit Court and that we have these guidelines on the West Coast that I think are very humane, and that is it's forcing us to really get serious about building services. So let's go to why we introduced the Safe Rest Villages. Basically, and I do have this as a lived experience, what our family found challenging was finding an on-ramp to services. Because what we experienced when Tim would come stay with us is he would go literally nuts, especially when we would leave for the day to go to work, and being alone, isolated in our house. And that wasn't what he was used to. They have community on the streets. And so it's a community that isn't very safe and it's not very healthy, but it's a community. And so we wanted to build something that would provide connection, especially people with behavioral health challenges and mental health challenges. Connection is definitely a key component of any sort of recovery. And so I'm just excited to share with you a little bit more about the Safe Rest Villages, which did receive unanimous support from the Portland City Council. All of us are on board with this 5-0 vote at the end of June. And that what we see is that Safe Rest Villages will provide a new and improved point of entry for people who move off the streets and into housing. And we think that those who receive these services will be much more successful when they move into housing. Safe Rest Villages will be outdoor shelters, but they're not tents. I'm going to repeat that. They are not tents. And they also will provide 24/7 wraparound services. Safe Rest Villages will have a positive impact on public health, environmental health, and community safety for all Portlanders. We really do need to meet the unhoused where they are, and again, provide this on-ramp to services. I do believe with some dignity and stable living and support services, the trauma of life on the streets really can be reduced. We need a place where they can be calm and have some restoration time, and that will lead to healing and stability as they lead to permanent housing. And I'm an optimist that will lead to home ownership someday. Let's go to the next slide. This graph just tries to explain, I'd say, the complexity and the whack-a-mole-ness of what it's like when you're trying to get your feet back, back on your feet when you're experiencing multiple challenges that Houseless usually takes in. First of all, you can know 100 houseless people and have 100 different compelling stories. So please always know that. But this slide shows how people can be at various points on the needs with housing, with health, with self-sufficiency. So when like Tim was housed for a couple of days, that was taken care of. But if there wasn't a 12-step meeting to go to, if there wasn't some connection time with those in recovery, if there wasn't time with a therapist, or time to get busy filling out applications. In other words, idle time without structure really isn't good for somebody that's trying to get back into a place where they can have resiliency. So it's the structure that the villages will provide with services coming to them that will give them hope for a much better life. And so this is an entry point in the continuum that, again, we really think will lead to a much better life. And I have to also say that I think the people that come to the villages and are successful in achieving a long-term housing are going to be some of our best employees working to serve the houseless community. Next slide. So Safe Rest Villages priorities are that the villages will be different depending on the space, first of all, available and the populations being served, but all of them will have some of these common things. These are the standards, if you will. First of all, we will have values that will be important for everyone to live by. Housing will be private spaces or shared spaces, whether it's with a partner or if they have a pet. Infrastructure is really important, and that's where the city is spending a lot of the money to build these. We want to make sure that there's, of course, electricity, clean water, Wi-Fi, HVAC, food preparation, fire safety, public transportation nearby, and hygiene that includes not honey buckets, but real running water, flush toilets, garbage recycling. And what I'm most excited about, and the partnership with the county is key on this one with the provider network, is to provide case management, mental health support, substance abuse services, and housing supports and community advocates. We are finally have an opportunity to get to know the people by name living on our streets that are showing just enough willingness to want to move forward and build a better life. Next slide. So indoor and outdoor shelters in Multnomah County, it wasn't long ago, just in 2015, where predominantly they were all clustered in downtown, predominantly Old Town and Central East Side. There's one Dignity Village location that you could see up in the north. As we move forward to October of 2021, we show that there's been quite an expansion, and we are doing what we said was needed, and that is to provide more services that are near where people are experiencing houselessness. The goal is really to meet people where they are and provide that support. Let's go to the next slide. The current outdoor shelter locations are on this map. The map shows in green, the current outdoor shelters and on public property, or those which receive some sort of public support. Note that the Menlo Park site is a park and ride location that we just announced, and that's out in East Portland. And that is the first one serving outer East Portland in our great city. And so you have the two that we have announced. There's more coming soon, and that's the Menlo Park site. And then there's the dot on the very south part of the screen, or the lower part of the screen, and that is the Southwest NATO Parkway. And that's with the Portland PBOT, Portland Bureau of Transportation, along with Oregon Department of Transportation. And I want to give an acknowledgement to TriMet, who is our partner with the Menlo Park site. Anyway, there is a need for shelters across the city. And as we announce sites, you can see that the team, the village team that's building this, is constantly going over that criteria. Above, you can see the other villages that have been in place prior to the Safe Dress villages to expand this. And I know that St. John's Village is wildly successful out in North Portland. It went from neighborhood opposition to neighborhood ownership and inclusion. And of course, many of the volunteers are in the neighborhood, some of the same people that were against them. So again, as an optimist, I know that we can keep creating that type of scenario as we keep building these villages going forward. Next slide. So how can you help? Again, this is an opportunity for all of us to kind of recharge our compassion. We're going into the winter months. We're going to have to, of course, always seek some winter shelters for severe weather. So it is a time where I find there's always been an appetite for that. However, this is not a sprint. Clearly, it's definitely a marathon. We need all of us that are part of the doer community in this city to have that stance and to really take care of yourselves emotionally so we can keep moving forward. In addition to emotional support, I want to acknowledge how many of you are doers and volunteers in your parks, and it's physically not very safe sometimes. And we want you to really notice what Johnny was saying earlier and utilize calling 311 or visit pdxreporter.org to report camps. The park rangers are becoming more part of the system, and they have a hotline number as well. My point is, it's really important to not always take charge yourself, but in fact to call and have support provided for you. Your feedback, and I hope that you also will notice in the fall monitoring of our budget that we passed in the spring. Every fall we look at the finances and see where there's opportunities to readjust. I think many of you might know there's over 30 million that we can invest in new money, and we will be focusing quite a bit on the Houselessness Challenge. We've been working very closely with Chair Kafori's office. Our office has been, along with the mayor, and we're bringing along the whole city council. So we're seeing a very coordinated effort between the two entities. And I'm hearing from many people like never before. So I hope that you all can see that. We often don't hear from people that want to come and say that they're supportive of the direction we're going, or at least be a critical friend of the direction we're going. And it'd be great to hear from you as we move forward and we bring this to the public in city council meetings soon. So I think I gotta say, you started me basically right on time, and we're so on time. So thank you, Randy, for running such a tight show. And we are going to open up this room. We'll open up the chat function, and it's time for Q&A. And I wanted to acknowledge that Charity Montez is here. She's the leader of the village team, and I will punt to her so you can sometimes get some real live, accurate details of what's going on the ground. I'm spending most of my time just trying to convince people that their land should be shared for this effort, and that's my job right now. And one could say it's an exciting job. There's never a dull moment. It's great to see some familiar faces on the site. I try to pretend we're in the same room. So if you want to turn on your screen, that'd be great, because it's always wonderful to hear from folks, or to see folks. Sorry, try to make it seem like we're in the same room.
Commissioner Ryan, thank you so much for such
Absolutely.
a clear and backfilled presentation. We're going to open up the chat now. Couple of ground rules, of course. Please be polite above all. And if you aren't, you'll get up one warning and then you'll be off. So put your questions into chat, and I'll sort of bring them to Commissioner Ryan. For those who came on late, we do have ASL. If you want to pin Taiwo or Sharika, you can better see their ASL translation. I think that's all the ground rules I needed to remember. I'll start things going while people get their questions. Oh, I know the other ground rule was please put your name and any affiliation you would like in your Zoom box, and that way, if we can't answer your questions, if the team can't answer a question, we can get back to you more easily that way. With that, Commissioner Ryan, there's been a lot of press in recent days about the county and the city pooling its resources from the surprising amount of tax revenue that is available. It's often been portrayed in the media that the county and city haven't been talking well together, that Chair Kafuri is primarily a supporter of permanent housing and less interested in transitional housing, or not, I shouldn't say transitional, less interested in shelters. The city, of course, is looking at it in a more through a more tactical frame of trying to just help people on the streets. I wonder if you could maybe talk to us a little bit about any misconceptions you feel about that portrayal, which I see frequently, and then also if there's any maybe a little preview of what we might see come out of these talks, this pooling of resources.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Chair Kafuri has been an advocate for the houseless community ever since she's been in office. And as someone that's been in office 13 months, given this assignment, I have so much respect for an elected official that's been on the front lines for this very challenging, just the biggest humanitarian crisis that I know I've experienced as a resident of the city since the early 60s. And so I just want to start off with that. I will also say that this is an and equation. So of course you want to stay focused on the building of affordable housing, and the voters have been very generous with both the city and the Metro bond to do just that. And it's really important that we continue to break dirt and get that up. I found that the county leaders that I work with have been open to all of the dialogue that I came in with. I just said, it looks like we need a better system at the front end. Two things I came in with. I said, we really need data. We need to know where we are and where we're going. So we got the group from Built for Zero, it's known as Community Solutions, and we got a contract signed with them. I pushed on that pretty hard when I first started. And then I said, I think we need to get rid of this either or thing and make it an and. And I found that there was a welcome dialogue, and we're starting to see more and more action to linking those two. I think also people need to know that it's a joint effort. The services, because the county has health and human services, they have behavioral health, they have mental health specialists. That's where the government purse goes for such services, directly work with houseless clients. And then the city has the infrastructure. So it's a very smart joint operation, as long as we stay really clear about what our roles are and do our roles well. So I'm finding that that focus is definitely there right now. And I think the fact that we're working together with our mutual opportunity of having a little bit of surprise investments, if you will, and that we're coordinating them together is a really, really good sign. And we will have more details on that next week. We're just in the middle of those helpful negotiations. We're just making sure everyone's on board, right?
No preview.
I just think that you'll see what people assume should always take place, which is that we're being efficient with our investments and a lot of role clarity on who's in charge of what. And so that's the main point I want to make. But I don't want to get into details because we're still in those negotiations and they're going well. And I have to bring along, several other commissioners, and there's only so much time in a day. So yeah, but just know it's a good thing. Trust me, it's a very good thing that we're working together and we're coordinating, collaborating, and we're focused on what we're supposed to focus on, which is how to improve this crisis.
I was noticing in the criteria in Johnny's presentation, and that parks and entry to parks is one of the criteria for sort of scoring which camps will be dealt with, but high value natural areas was not among them. Can you speak to that at all as to why those would not be considered as important criteria?
Actually, there is a piece of criteria included related to environmental impact, and that is certainly something that goes into our assessment process. I mean, whenever we go out into any natural area, we do work very closely with folks in the Bureau of Environmental Services with regard to those efforts, and that is most definitely a piece of criteria that we look at. Does the presence of an encampment, essentially hurt or is that harmful, towards the natural area, or what kinds of, is there a hazmat cleanup required? I mean, that is a piece of criteria that we do look at.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Commissioner. Commissioner Ryan, do you have a position on utilizing the post office as a safe rest village?
I've spent some time on the phone trying to access property all over the city, and that would just be one of many. I know so much more about DEQ challenges than I ever thought I would. And I will just say at this time, although we've had conversations with the Prosper Portland about that property, there's other sites that we are focused on that I think are going to help us achieve our goal of more of a reach throughout the city. So,
will there be additional sites downtown, or at least near the central city?
There'll probably be a couple more in the central area and a couple more outside of the central area.
Yeah, we have a question wanting to know about.
Charity, was that a safe way to answer that question, or did I leak something? All right.
Oh, that was perfect.
Yeah, so everything gets leaked, I'm finding, so it doesn't really matter. No.
Of course.
Yeah.
We had a question about safe rest villages in Outer East, particularly Lents. Will we see additional ones out there where obviously the problem is as acute as it is downtown?
Now, I appreciate the question because we are locating them where there are people that are in unsanctioned camping at a high rate, and obviously that's an area of town. We even though it's only like yards into Southeast, the Menlo Park location is in Southeast Portland on 122nd, and so we have one location already in Southeast Portland. We don't have another one to announce, and obviously there was anyway. We don't have another one to announce at this time.
We have another question, interesting one. How is the city working with ODOT on the encampments? They famously have put a lot of boulders in places that were, previously in informal camps.
Well, our focus currently with ODOT is that they often are connected to some of the land that we're looking at and working in partnership with PBOT. So my attention with ODOT is really around building the villages. Charity, would you want to add anything to that? I know there's one of our current sites is a partnership with ODOT.
That's correct, Commissioner. The 2300 block of Southwest NATO is a partnership between PBOT and ODOT. And in addition to that, the existing C3PO Village on Water Avenue is ODOT property is adjacent, and they are working with us to let us trench through their property to bring more services into that existing village. So we're continuing to work with them. But I think that question is about encampments, and that might be something for Johnny Lewis to address.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner and Charity. Our program, so the city does have an intergovernmental agreement with ODOT to do campsite cleanups and removals on ODOT property. And in fact, they pay us for this work. So it's a not to exceed $2 million annually to perform, again, campsite cleanups and removals on their property. And that's, you can actually view the IGA, the intergovernmental agreement that we have with them on our website. If folks are interested, but we do have that partnership in place.
Commissioner, I have a question. Does the city or a joint office have a timeline with goals to which you all are willing to be held accountable? I know that you have a certain number of safe rest villages that you've said will be sited, at least, if not up and running by the end of the year. With this, additional money and the conversations with the county, do you think we'll be able to roll out something in which we'll actually see timelines that are hit?
Yeah, there's a reset taking place right now. In general, a home for everyone is the governance structure that brought together the joint office for the community, and that was built 10 years ago, or 5 to 10 years ago, and so now we're at a different place. So with the influx of investments coming from the Here Together measure, where the community said they want more services, wraparound services that really get into bigger investments for behavioral health and mental health, we're taking that in. So that's also connected to why we need real-time data, so we know exactly not just how many people are on the streets. We can't wait for a point in time count every 2 years. It's really important that we have current data, and then we also track, for example, with the villages, when people are in the village, we want to see when they move into permanent housing, and then what's their rate of sustainability in that apartment in, say, 2 years later, compared to somebody that was brought in without those services leading into it. So we need data so we can start to have better assessment tools on what's working and what's not. This is, when you're in a crisis, you have to take risk and you have to build, and you have to be agile to make adjustments along the way. And so with the data and with the building of the villages, this is just getting started. And so we're just bringing more tools into the toolbox, if you will. So, the fact is, we want to encourage our houseless community to really take on the services that we provide. I'm somebody that's tough love has worked for me in my life, and I think it's compassionate to provide love, but you have to provide some direction. And so we're just bringing in more services, so we give our houseless residents more opportunities to improve their life condition, and it's going to be challenging, but it's exactly what we need to do.
In the design of the safe rest villages, is the healing value of nature being considered at all?
I want to go on and on about that, but Charity's dealing with it on a daily basis, so it'd be rude for me to get all visioning with you. Charity, what you answer that so I can have your back.
Appreciate the question. So there's a couple of things. We would love to have all of them be sited next to really tall, towering trees that provide shade and that access to nature. And that's not necessarily going to happen just based on our challenges locating the 6 sites in the first place. But we are absolutely aware of that. The sleeping pods or tiny homes in the villages will have heating and cooling. There's a lot of ways that villagers will be able to bring in that healing component of nature. And some of that is, community gardens that we already see, raised beds, and then also connection to the services. And hopefully with the distribution of these villages throughout the city, some will be right next to beautiful trees and parks and natural areas that can support that.
Excellent, thanks. Commissioner, I want to go back to the data collection. I got to spend a bit of time with a group, with an organization, the leader of an organization called Community Solutions that is national. And a lot of their data collection is focused on, is anticipatory in nature, in the sense of collecting data on people who are close to houselessness, and trying to find ways to keep them in housing. What concentrations is the joint office and your office working on in terms of that? Because I mean, we have the sword of Damocles hanging over a lot of people's heads with the eviction moratorium, and we could see a lot more people without homes.
Yeah, well, the data sets include those that are at risk, so you can anticipate what services you need. The data has to include those that are chronically houseless, which Portland has a very high number of people who are chronically houseless, which is defined as 2 years or more on the streets with a diagnosis of mental health or behavioral health. And so I think that it's just important that we actually get our data sets created. We have a dashboard so the community knows how many are threatened with being houseless at any given time, and also how many are chronically houseless on our streets, and those that are in shelters, those that are in housing, and those that are ready to move out of assistance because their life has a lot of resilience, and they're making money and providing and hopefully being a part of the job market that provides some support to those that are houseless. So it's a vast continuum. And when we met with them, that was the conversation, was about having that real-time data that allows you to see the whole spectrum.
I have a question. What percentage of houseless will these villages bring shelter to?
Well, at the beginning, we are around roughly like 300. The hope is that after so many months, they're able to move in into sustained apartments for the long term, and then new people will come in. So that's the flow. If they go well, and I hope that we will just continually improve them, so they will not just start one way and stay the same. They'll just continually improve as we learn, as we go along. We will hopefully add more services, and this will be just part of our continuum. But the hope is that these won't be for long term, because we will be able to move more and more people into housing. It's gonna be quite a journey. And I know you mentioned the moratorium being lifted, and I think everyone might have the same knowledge I do, which is we have the money. We just have to continue to be more nimble and working with our partners who know the people in the apartments, and literally going door to door to work with them and with their landlords, so that they can work together as a team. Both the housing provider and the renter both benefit when we release the money that's available from the state. It's been a frustrating process to get the money to people, trust me.
Yeah, understood. Seems like that's been the case everywhere.
Yeah,
like most states. Not that that's an excuse. To you ran on one of the planks of your campaign, was nurturing more private-public partnerships. What are the private beacons on this issue for you? I mean, there's the high-profile ones such as Harbor for Hope, and I'm suddenly blanking on the name of the group that's taken over the Wapato jail. But what are some others out there that you feel are really doing solid work in this area? And
yeah, raising money for nonprofits for 25 plus years. It's in this town, it's pretty easy to understand the value of having philanthropic dollars coupled with government investments to get the population results we need. We saw how important that was to improve our graduation rates when that was the big crisis around 15 years ago. And I'm really confident that we can do that in terms of this challenge. Well, right now it's starting with trying to get private entities to offer some land really cheaply and we're in some negotiations around that. We're in conversations with some in the philanthropic community. We already have great response with Kaiser Permanente, and who's really excited about the services coming to the ground for behavioral health and mental health. And Chief of Staff Kelly Torres is on this call. I know I'm missing a couple other partners in the private sector that you've been in dialogue with of late.
Yes, we've been working with Cascadia Health Share.
Sure.
We meet regularly with philanthropic partners, Murdoch, Meyer Memorial, others. I think you covered most of them, Commissioner.
Yeah, they will be included frequently in our dialogue as we continue to build forward to provide these services on the ground to our houseless residents.
I kind of wanted to narrow the question a little bit, because I mean, I would expect and hope that the philanthropic community would be involved, but I'm talking about kind of private initiative in terms of things like Harbor for Hope.
Oh, I see what you mean. So yeah, there are some providers that are not currently part of the traditional network in the county, and through their own grit and innovation, they're in the market now doing great work. And Bybee Lakes is a great example of that. And we are working with them, and just know that you will see them be more integrated into the system. And I think that's just how it's going to keep working. Is we cannot limit ourselves to the same providers. This has grown, and the complexity of it has expanded. And so you just got to keep bringing in more people, what I call the learning community. So what's more important is that these partners, whether their purse is mostly from the counties or from the government or for private, that they connect with one another and keep learning from one another. So one of the best things you can do as elected officials to be that connector of those communities that are doing this work. And I think that is a service that I want to bring to government. I think government has too many walls up, and we need to let those down and bring in the community assets. We're not going to get through this by the government alone. Well, I'll tell you that. If we don't have the innovation, the creativity, and the grit of those in the community at the table, then I think we won't get the results that we need. So I'm excited to play a major role in convening all of those community assets to work with government.
A number of folks have asked about the sort of new brand of meth that is hitting the streets. It was profiled in the Atlantic Monthly this month, in which, once again, Portland figures into another national article. How are you seeing, is there a necessity for changes in the approach in terms of services to deal with this new scourge?
Yeah, I read the article, and I have some, friends that have suffered from that. It really hit the gay community hard years ago. And so I've been told by some friends in recovery that they're seeing that with new people coming into the rooms of the NA 12-step rooms, if you will. So I'm aware of it. So the answer is yes, but this is not my area of expertise. And so this is if there was someone from the county that's skilled in behavioral health and is studying this issue, they would be answering this question right now. But the answer is yes, we're aware of it. And yes, the professionals will understand that. And that's why Kelly Torres mentioned some of the partners that we need to bring to the table, so they'll have that expertise and that lens.
What are you really hoping to see from the parks community in terms of stepping up for this issue?
How do I see parks stepping into this issue?
No, the parks community, not PPR. I mean,
okay.
Doing a lot of very solid work in terms of frontline work with this. But I'm thinking about the wider friends groups, parks folks, natural area folks. What would you like to see from them?
It's a really good question. I think this would be a great, I wish we were together right now in a small group. We were in a breakout session. It'd be a great breakout session for us to be in small groups to have a deeper dialogue about what we can do. I think Portland's full of doers. Portland's full of people that definitely love their parks. That's why a lot of us made this home, is the beauty and the nature that we experience daily. And so how can we protect the sacred beauty of the land and be a part of how to be helpful to move this humanitarian crisis to a much better place, so it doesn't, in fact, destroy our land. So it's really about leading with compassion, and I know that can fall on deaf ears right now, where there's some parks that have had some really gripping, horrific issues. Having been the commissioner that led a cleanup of Laurel's Park back in the summer, it was 2 weeks of my life I learned a lot in, and it was 14 days straight of preparing for it, proving that if you actually collaborate with every bureau, if you collaborate with every commissioner, things like that can go much better. So I think our office is providing a blueprint for how to continue to move forward with that type of efficiency. I just ask that the community knows that we're working our tails off to try to fix this, and that your compassion and your support and your critical feedback is really helpful. But we got to be in this together. No one wants Portland to look and feel the way it is right now. No one wants our public right of way to be taken away, and for people to feel like they're trapped in their homes and their apartments because they don't feel safe on our streets. No one wants that. And I will say that since in the year that 13 months I've been on the city council, there is more cohesiveness, more focus from the entire body on this issue, coupled with the county. So just in 13 months, I've seen a tremendous effort for us as elected leaders to be very honest about the problem and to continue to move forward with real solutions. And so I can tell you that much. And I just know that we can't do this alone, and it's going to take a lot of grassroots efforts as well.
I'm going to save a question that Stan Vernon until after you leave. I want to have a sort of final moment on a more personal and sort of kind of global level. So I was really moved by some of the things that you said during your campaign about the parallels of the AIDS crisis and COVID. And since at the root of houselessness, there is a public health crisis, I'm wondering what parallels you see between the AIDS crisis and your experience of the AIDS crisis and the current crisis of houselessness.
Yeah, got emotional. I think two things popped into my head, and that is when society is hit with something horrific, it brings out a lot of emotion in people. And it's real easy for people to go into denial. And so one of the most important things you can do with courage is to accept what's happening, just acceptance of the truth. And I definitely, and the flip side of that is denial and fear. And so I think you've seen some polarization that's natural when we're faced with such gripping adversity. And I, having lived through that and made some tough decisions and did a lot of adult behavior change to stay alive. And adult behavior change is the hardest thing that you can do as to get population results. I always noticed that in education, kids were just fine and resilient and could handle any changes, but man, it was rough on the parents and the community to accept those changes. So we're in a very big adult behavior change moment, and how we come together to accept science and how we do this not just for ourselves, but it allows us to know that we're bigger than ourselves. And so what I loved about the HIV crisis and what I experienced with it was coming together with other communities that showed their care for the predominantly gay men that were dying at that time, and having the lesbian sisters be some of the best providers of, providing compassionate care. I know when we were building an HIV facility in Portland, in Seattle, when I was there in a part of town, no one wanted it. It was my first foray into NIMBY issues. And after it was built, Bailey Boucher House, as the first development director for that organization in Seattle. Oh, I see someone clapping. That just made me so happy. You know about Bailey Boucher House? Oh, good. Sorry. I shouldn't do that. I'm pretending Tim and I are in the same room right now. Anyway, it's so fun to have people who are so angry and against something keep coming back, and you keep doing dialogue, and then before you know it, this one person I have in my brain right now was like one of our best board members, and she brought along so many people in her church community. And I'll end with the church community, because I do think that that's a sector that hasn't been lifted up in this dialogue. And there's a really good story, the Beacon Village, that's taking place at Bridgeport. I think it's called Bridgeport United Church of Christ. It's Tara Wilkins is the minister there. I probably didn't get the name right, but they have 15. Is it 15 or is it 10? Anyway, they have some shelters going in, some pods, and they will be opening up really soon. So there's going to be villages in our communities of faith as well. And so I just think we all have to get more comfortable with how we're going to come together and keep building with that shared sacrifice, and more importantly, that shared opportunity that this is going to reveal. And it's going to really show who Portland is. Portland's either going to come together and figure this out, and we're going to move forward, or not. And so I don't think we have a choice. And so it's time to build, it's time to get behind action. And instead of just admiring how smart you are about the problem and how your solutions would fix it right away, but would they really? So, you got to check yourself on when you have some really quick solutions to something that's so complex. When you're getting population results, I'll just leave with this. Complex problems take complex solutions. Why can't we just accept that? It's like you don't just quickly fix something that's this complex, but you start to take incremental action. So in 1 year's time, you're a hell of a lot better off than you were a year ago because you did something. And why I'm in office, which I hope is I get a full term soon, it gives us a chance in 4 years, 5 years time to see we're a heck of a lot better off than we would have been by continuing to admire the problem, continuing to shame people that dare to take action. It's like, not under my watch. We're going to take action, and we're going to do what we need to do for the city that we all love. That's who Portland is. And that's why I'm here just doing the best I can with good people like you.
Commissioner, I know you have a hard stop. I so appreciate you taking this time with us. If some of the members of your team can hang out a little longer, and we can ask a couple of other questions we didn't get to, but again, can't thank you enough for spending this time with us.
You're welcome, Randy, and thank you to the Parks community for allowing me to be with all of you this evening. And I'm going to go out to dinner with my spouse and two friends that I haven't seen in about 6 months. So anyway, that's a note to myself and all of you to keep some balance in your life, because this is a marathon and we need all of you. Take care.
Good night. Team Ryan, can you hang for a little bit longer?
I can stay for maybe 5 or 10 more minutes here.
Okay, I'm trying to scroll back through here and find some of the questions that seemed more in your wheelhouse, Johnny. And I'm having a hard time finding them.
Randy, there was one that I think was asked a couple of times, just related to what do we do when folks refuse shelter? And I think that is a great question. I've talked with outreach and service providers about this very thing, and they all have the same response. And when you're working with folks that are living outside, and especially folks who are chronically houseless, it's about working to build trust, and that building that trust and that engagement takes time. Folks, so officially speaking, the last point in time count saw some 2,000 folks living unsheltered and outside. Those are 2,000 different reasons as to why those individuals are living unsheltered and outside. And I think my response to this is, again, just continued engagement on the part of qualified service providers. We work quite closely with groups like Join and Transition Projects, and Cascadia Behavioral Health Care, especially when working with folks who do have mental health and addiction issues. These groups are crucial in just connecting with folks living outside and on the ground and working to build that trust. And a part of the beauty of this project that Commissioner Ryan is working on with the Safe Rest Village team. I mean, these new villages essentially will provide a more diverse range of shelter options for people living outside. So for example, let's say someone refuses shelter in a mass sort of traditional shelter setting where they can't bring their dog or their partner. The idea with these new villages is they'll be able to bring their dog and their partner. So there's more reason for folks to find a more stable situation. And again, this looks different depending on the person and who they are. But the short answer to your question is just, it's really about working to build trust with folks and identifying what their barriers are to finding that more stable living situation, whatever that is. And then kind of breaking the barriers to that and assisting with that.
Thank you. David Goodyear asks, is there a level, Gooddyke, sorry, is there a level of service that that these programs can attain that you think will really trigger a shift in how camping is enforced?
I will say that the past year and a half has been just a really poor example. There was a very dramatic shift in policy relative to COVID in March of 2020, where we received, every local jurisdiction again received guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which said, in summary, do not disperse encampments. I think that as we move out of the pandemic, and as vaccines become more and more widely available as they are, we too should be able to update our approach. And we are seeking to be more responsive to these types of issues. But of course, it's taking time. And what we're seeing right now is, again, we're continuing to respond to reports received, and we're identifying camps that do meet our posting thresholds for removal, but we don't necessarily have the ability right now to get there to immediately post. And that's for reasons of which I cited Delta Park earlier. Delta Park is a good example of a very large cleanup that took all 9 of our rapid response crews 2 weeks to fully address. And that sort of thing really tied us up to the point where we weren't able to address other issues during that 2-week period. But with that being said, we are intent on being more responsive, and we do recognize the need for us to be in other areas. I would just encourage you all to please continue to use the campsite reporting system that we have in place. And this is primarily, you can use either pdxreporter.org and select the campsite report icon, or you can call 311, and either one of those methods will automatically create a work assignment for one of our Clean Start crews to go to the area and have eyes on the scene to provide us with that assessment to start the process. And we're going to continue to follow up on these locations, and we are committed to addressing the camps that pose the greatest risk to public health and safety. So please keep the reports coming because we're intent on assisting.
Okay, Charity, Kelly, is there anything you would like to add in closing moments of this that we haven't gotten to?
One thing I will add, just to piggyback on what Johnny was saying, is keeping this at a high level. I think that we will see resources to shift the ability to respond soon.
Okay, well, thank you all for your work and for spending, this evening. It's a lot of staff time in there. Kelly's got her exercise cycle right behind her. I know she's going to jump on too. Kelly, by the way, is Commissioner Ryan's chief of staff. Charity is, I'm blanking on her exact title, but she's part of the team working on the Safe Rest Villages, and both former Parkies. So we've got the Parks team in the center of this, former Parks team. And so again, thanks to everybody. I think it's a really good idea for us to maybe do some follow-up sessions on this issue for how Parks folks can get more involved and meaningfully in this dialogue and in the solutions. So thanks to everybody for taking the time out of your evening, and we'll be in touch. So have a nice evening.